Hi, Rachel. Hi.
Hi, Jerry. How are you?
Hi, good. Yeah. How are you?
I'm doing great. So to start, this is a mixture of different mediums all at once. And coming in as a director when you are mixing so many mediums at the same time, and especially in that first episode, making it clear kind of who the real subjects are with the actors that you have kind of telling the modern story. What were your guys' kind of approach to making sure that we as the audience know like where the fictional telling of this story is versus the real life kind of uh like documentation comes into play?
Yeah. I mean, I think what sort of drew us to the series in the first place was the fact that there were these kind of authentic archival recordings and that sound always kind of invites pictures and invites interpretation.
Mhm.
If you're in a room in an empty house and you hear kind of footsteps upstairs, you immediately have a picture of what that might be. And often you picture the worst thing it might be. Um, and so kind of listening to these audio tapes, you're aware both that you've got this material that somehow speaks to the truth of what's happening in that moment, but then we're layering on top of it this kind of, we decided we wanted to rebuild the house and work with actors in that house with the tape recordings, and there's this kind of layer of interpretation on top of it. And you're right that sometimes it's really fruitful to blur those lines, that sometimes you're, because for me what's interesting about that form is that that I guess one of our uncertainties about ghosts is, are they out there or are they in our head? And in a way that it's, the sound is out there and the picture's in our head. um and it felt that was a good form to explore those things that we don't quite know, the things that are in the shadows over our shoulder. um and at times it's useful to blur that, and at times it's useful to remind people that the actors are actors, and we pull out and we see the set. And I guess what I hope that sets up in an audience is a constant process of thought about, what do I believe and what do I not believe, and which feels, again, sort of speaks to the themes of the series.
And did that kind of help with, I think, when I think of poltergeists, I obviously always think of, the movie Poltergeist with, I know him from Coach T. Craig Nelson. I was like, what's his name? But I think of the movie Poltergeist and the kids saying like they're here and things like that. And to have this, which is centered around children, again, kind of dealing with a poltergeist, was that a way for you to kind of pull back and be like, it's not as scary as you instantly would imagine something with poltergeist in the title to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. That's right. This is a story in which there's like a set of events, and then layered on top of that events are all these stories about it, and the stories get more. I mean, it's the way we talk about anything uncertain, don't we? Is that we kind of make it scarier and scarier with each retelling. And I suppose one of the things we wanted to do was kind of strip that away and look at what that experience was like for that family, and to sort of keep an audience on the kind of knife edge between sort of belief and skepticism, I suppose, and really try and uh yeah, not, keep it true to the tape recordings, keep it true to which I think, it's not, maybe they're not traditional horror scary, but they're really unsettling. They are unsettling, I think, and this kind of world in which this happens is a really unsettling one, in which sort of things become a little unstable.
Yeah, and part of the most unsettling thing I think for me was the kind of the journalism aspect of it. Like these journalists, instead of trying to find help, they were just there to kind of mooch in a way off of this family and what
Yeah.
they're going through. And to see just all talking about it with the tape recordings.
Yeah, I mean, it's a totally weird situation where, teenage girls in a bedroom where there are like five scientists, investigators setting up radio equipment to try and record a ghost, or there's people putting tape recorders under your bed, or taking photographs. And I think, when you talk about the Enfield Poltergeist story, it's as much about those things as it is about the poltergeist. It's as much about what people wanted to find, and the stories they told about it, and the impact of that intrusion on the family.
Yeah, and
That
you
poltergeist.
Yeah, and you guys had so much though to work off of because there are so many elements kind of to those tape recordings where it is you could have just done the lead up with that family and like meeting Dr. Gross and kind of working with that. Then there is like, you know, the whole reporter aspect. There are the kids. There's like all these different layers within that span of time where they are kind of haunted and then they go away. It could have been a whole fictional, like there's just so many layers. How did you guys come to the conclusion of just sticking to those tapes and the reality of kind of like the information that we did have versus making this a completely fictional telling of something that is out there that we don't know what is true and what isn't true of the situation?
Yeah, I mean, it felt. I guess we roughly stick to the chronology of the story. You know, these events have unfolded over 18 months, and they followed the pattern that poltergeists have been reported as following for centuries. You know, Roman times. You know, they talk about kind of knocks and furniture moving, and that kind of developing into a kind of where the poltergeist assumes a kind of personality or the voice that speaks. So there was a sort of pattern to the events that has attention to it anyway, and it is true to what unfolded. And I guess for us, it was always about selecting tapes that helped you think about what was going on with the family, how those relationships are shifting all the way through. So to begin with, it feels to me the first episode is very much about a set of inexplicable events and people try to understand it. And the second episode, it's like everyone piles in on the house and they're trying to measure it. They're trying to measure the ghost, basically. And then in the third episode, there are kind of doubts creeping in, and it becomes a much more psychological episode about the dynamics between the family and between the family and the investigator. And in the fourth episode, we try and take you out into the impact of those events on that family today, and it felt really important to sort of leave people with their experience at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
That was probably the pattern that guided us.
Yeah, and I do think too, I really like in that first episode, especially kind of seeing the breaks in it. Like I like when they leave and they're like everything was fine, like we were gone and it was fine. And it's like how everyone clings to that. They're like, oh, it's fine. And like because we see these tropes in horror movies a lot. And I do think it's so fun to kind of see it in this light, which was like seeing these journalists like cling to these little things in such like a kind of gross way.
Yeah.
When you are like bringing those like now look at it like horrific things to light, but to them they were like, this is hard hitting journalism.
Yeah.
To kind of like balance that, did you guys like when you were working with the actors to make them like because they are for the most part, from what I could tell, just like mouthing along to the actual tape recordings.
Oh yeah, it's lip syncing the recordings.
Yeah, they were like lip syncing with them. Did you guys like have conversations about like playing up to those aspects? Because it is so interesting to see kind of like the the acting components of those scenes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that the tapes dictated a lot of what the actors did, so that one of the things the actors said is that the first thing they needed to get really was how the person breathed, and that to understand, to try and breathe like the person was breathing in their monologue, or the thing they were saying was the thing that enabled them to get the timing of the words right so that they could lip sync it accurately. And then, you would hear like someone move from there to there across the room, and that would mean that we had to move them like that in the show. We had to. So in some ways that we kept discovering things about the tapes that would dictate how we did things, because it made no sense if you didn't move the person, the voice was coming from the wrong place, or this person wasn't in the room. That didn't make sense. So constantly the tapes, the more you explored them, were sort of telling us about what was going on. And then it's like this, it is, you're really reminded of what a different time the 70s are, and the values that were going on at the time, and what a terrible time to be a teenager, and especially what a terrible time to be a teenage girl, like completely sort of disempowered in that situation. And that felt important to kind of convey. But I think I sort of feel it's true to the tape recordings. It's not like we kind of amp that up. There's shocking stuff in there, really.
And it's fascinating to me too, because I think it's not exactly the same time period, but we have like in America at the same time ish. We have like Ed and Lorraine Warren, and we have kind of their paranormal investigations happening. And so we see where people are like falling into the beliefs of the paranormal a bit more in this time period. And when you see like this where so many people were like fully on board until they're not, what was important for you as a filmmaker to make sure like we are on the same journey from the jump, that everyone who was following the story at the same time was, because people were
Yeah, I think,
believing
I
this.
mean, yeah, I think it was really important for us to kind of keep an audience on that knife edge between sort of belief and skepticism, because I think that's where the most fruitful place for an audience to be, because it makes an audience active, thinking about, well, what do I believe? What evidence have I got? What's the, why might this be happening? And that's a very fruitful place for people to be. We come into I don't know whether you've seen all the episodes, but we come into it very much through Maurice Gross's investigation. So we're coming into it from an outsider's point of view, I guess, who's drawing conclusions, perhaps even jumping to conclusions about the family and the situation. And I think and we use his writings and notebooks from his diaries, as a kind of voice through it. So when you're with him, and there's a sort of clash between that investigator and the family that are at the center and experiencing this thing. So it felt like, and Morris is not necessarily a reliable narrator. That's one of the things about it that I find kind of interesting. That we're constantly, hopefully, questioning.
Yeah, and I think it's so cool to kind of see. I think the use of, for me, like the set to like the building of it, because I think the only thing in recent years I've seen done that is like the John Benet Ramsey movie had a similar thing where they like it had like a set and made it very clear this is like a fictional telling, or like we're removed from it. And it's a very interesting kind of like departure. And so you said like that's kind of how you guys wanted to have it separated, but can you talk for a minute about just how you guys came to that conclusion though through the thought process? Was that something from the jump you guys had decided, or was that just through trying to figure out the separation that you?
I mean, it never felt to me like what we needed to do was create sort of recreations that just kept you in all the time, that were substitute. We weren't doing those recreations because we hadn't got any film. For me, it was always interesting that gap between these hissy 70s archival recordings and what we see. And I think in the series you kind of forget. Often you are right in the drama, but it feels really useful to pull that outside sometimes, because it helps an audience just think again about what they're hearing, question what they're seeing. There's this kind of moment where one of the physicists, I think it's in episode 4, describes like this perceivable reality that humans have, and then there's the kind of world beyond of mind. And it always seemed to me the set was a bit like that, that the set is our perceivable reality, but when you're outside the set, there's this kind of world of shadows that you don't quite know what's going on, and it's the things we don't know about, the things that are beyond perception. And that's sort of the area that I guess poltergeists explore.
Yeah, and for one last question, I do think it is such an interesting question, because it's like, I know I used to be terrified of like the movie The Exorcist, and I was terrified of like the demons in the world of the like unknown that no one can kind of figure out, and believing in things like that. And I do like that this posits the question of like, what do you believe in and what don't you? Was there anything that through your own research for this that you found fascinating through like the tapes themselves, or like what those journalists kind of like came to the conclusion of by the end of it?
I mean, I sort of don't believe in skepticism either, like there are things on those tapes that are strange and inexplicable. There's 6 people in a room and a bed starts vibrating, and you would think that one of those 6 adults that are there would see what the cause of it was, and none of them are seeing it. So there's something kind of interesting going on there, whether it's supernatural or whether it's not. So for me, it took, I also think it speaks to like the need to honor people's experience. Like if you know, I don't, like some people say the Enfield Poltergeist is, you know, it was just the kids messing around. It's clearly not just that, you know, there's clearly much more going on than that. And to sort of honor the experience of the kids that were at the center of it, it feels important to take seriously what they experienced, no matter how you explain it.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for talking with me today. I really appreciate it.